Recording in progress.
Good evening. I'll call to order the Arvada City Council meeting for September 13th, 2021. Call upon Councilmember Lauren Simpson.
Thank you, Mayor. Please join me in bowing our heads for a moment of reflective silence. And now please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Kristen Rush, if you'll do the roll call.
Mayor Williams?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Miller?
Here.
Councilmember Pfeiffer?
Here.
Councilmember Ford?
Here.
Councilmember Jones?
Here.
Councilmember Marriott?
Here.
Councilmember Simpson?
Here.
Next, we have the minutes for our August 16th, 2021 council meeting. Any comments on that? Seeing none, they will stand approved as presented tonight. Tonight we have two recognitions and proclamations. The first will be presented by Councilmember Bob Pfeiffer.
Thank you, Mayor. Do we have people from ARSE here tonight? You want to come on up? There they all are. Familiar faces. The Arvada Wheat Ridge Service Ambassador for Youth, ARSE, is celebrating its 20th anniversary this year. City Council would issue a proclamation recognizing the organization, its founders, and the volunteers for 20 community organizations. Dwayne Yaus and Diana Hugman, did I get it right? Will be here to present. I'm going to go ahead and read the proclamation, and then I'll run down there and meet you all. It's good to see your faces. I haven't seen you all in a long time. Maybe I should join Kiwanis or something again. So. Yeah. Or the Rotary, exactly. All right. Good little competition there. Yeah, exactly. So whereas Arvada Wheat Ridge Service Ambassador for Youth was founded in 2001 by Dwayne Yaus and Bill Johnson, Arvada residents, and Diane Hageman, Dean of the Arvada campus of Red Rocks Community College, and whereas the mission of this volunteer-driven organization is to facilitate the ongoing educational and leadership opportunities for Arvada and Wheat Ridge youth who have overcome adversity. And whereas the purpose of this organization is to ensure that youth who have overcome adversity receive public recognition and opportunities to help them achieve their potential. And whereas from 2001 to 2021, a total of 1,538 youth of the Arvada and Wheat Ridge communities have been recognized by this organization in annual ceremonies, have been issued certificates of recognition and their names placed in the United States Congressional Record. And whereas from 2001 to 2021, a total of 401 of the recognized youth have been awarded scholarships to Red Rocks Community College. And whereas Arvada Wheat Ridge Service Ambassador for Youth will be celebrating their 20 years of existence, and many contributions it has made to the betterment of Arvada and Wheat Ridge and celebratory events in the community room at Red Rocks Community College in Lakewood on October 21, 2021 from 5:30 to 8:30 p.m. Now, therefore, be resolved that the Arvada City Council wishes to recognize Arvada Wheat Ridge Service Ambassadors for Youth to honor its founders and volunteers for 20 community organizations who have sustained their organization for 2 decades, and to congratulate the young people who have become confident members and leaders in our communities because of their because of this unique and special program. This is dated the 13th day of September 2021, signed by the mayor and all of City Council. And I just want to say I will be there this year. I have in the past, and it's a great event, and it gives me goosebumps every time because you make a huge impact in a lot of youth's life. Some of us might think that that's just a little gesture. It's a huge effect of what you do on all of these kids in our community. So I'm proud that you're part of our community and our and supporting youth in our communities, and hopefully we have 20, 60, 80, 100 more years of this. So thank you.
And if one of you or all of you would like to make any comments, certainly go back to the microphone after we get some pictures. If you'll go to the microphone there, Mr. Yaus.
Mr. Mayor and members of City Council, thank you for this opportunity to have this proclamation read this evening, telling about Arvada Wheat Ridge Service Ambassadors for Youth and its 20-year celebration on October the 21st at Red Rocks Community College at the Lakewood campus, where it will be held. I'm Dwayne Yaus, one of the co-founders of ASE, and here is one of the other co-founders, Diane Hageman, who was dean over at the Red Rocks campus during the founding of ASE. We at ASE are so proud of the accomplishments that these 20 years with over 1,500 students recognized and many awarded scholarships to Red Rocks. Keep in mind, these students are youth who have overcome adversities. They're not our regular range of students. These kids have got, many of them have got major problems. And so with the help of the community, we have helped them rise above and achieve something over and above their adversities. But this wouldn't have been possible without the partnership of the 5 stars of ASE. Did you all get a brochure in your packet tonight? If you look on the brochure, you'll see our emblem right here in the middle. And it says Arvada Wheat Ridge Service Ambassadors for Youth. And there's the mountains, which are the Rocky Mountains. And then there are 5 stars, yellow stars there. Those stars represent the service clubs of Arvada and Wheat Ridge, the business and communities of both cities, Jeffco Schools, Red Rocks Community College, and the governments of Arvada and Wheat Ridge. So on behalf of Arvada, thank you for having been a special star for these young adults. And, oh, by the way, Mayor Williams, would you be willing to attend this ceremony coming up next month in October and say a few words on behalf of the city and how it relates to ASE? Of course. And I can fill you in on the details later. So again, thank you, Council. You've been a wonderful star for us.
Next, we have a proclamation that Councilmember John Marriott's going to present.
Thank you, Your Honor. Get the privilege to read the proclamation for Constitution Week, and I'd like to invite Chapter Regent from the Daughters of the American Revolution to come on up. I believe this is Chrissy Ruby, is that correct? Okay, thank you. So the United States Constitution stands as a testament to the tenacity of Americans throughout history to maintain their liberties, freedoms, and inalienable rights. The Daughters of the American Revolution began the tradition of celebrating the Constitution for 1 week in September, beginning in 1955. During Constitution Week, citizens are asked to reflect on their responsibility to protect and defend the Constitution and study the historical events which led to the framing of the Constitution on September 17, 1787. The Dr. Susan Anderson Chapter, National Society of the Daughters of the American Revolution, was organized in Arvada in 2008. As a nonprofit service organization, the Society promotes historic preservation, education, and patriotism. Members of this chapter are present to accept the proclamation with Regent Chrissy Ruby as the spokesperson. So I'd like to read the proclamation here. It says, whereas the Constitution of the United States of America, the guardian of our liberties, embodies the principles of limited government in a republic dedicated to rule by law, and whereas September 17, 2021 marks the 234th anniversary of the framing of the Constitution of the United States of America by the Constitutional Convention. And whereas it is fitting and proper to officially recognize this magnificent document, its anniversary and patriotic celebrations which will commemorate it, and whereas Public Law 1915 guarantees the issuing of a proclamation each year by the President of the United States of America designating September 17th through 23rd as Constitution Week. Now therefore be it proclaimed that the mayor and city council of the city of Arvada, Colorado hereby recognize the week of September 17th through 23rd, 2021 to be Constitution Week, and ask our citizens to reaffirm the ideals the framers of the Constitution had in 1787 by vigilantly protecting the freedoms guaranteed to us through this guardian of our liberties. And it's signed by the mayor and all members of council. And I'll bring this proclamation down, and then if you'd like to say a few words, you may.
Mayor Williams and the Arvada City Council members. The Constitution is a living document that assures each citizen the freedoms Americans cherish. The tradition of celebrating the Constitution was started many years ago by the National Society Daughters of the American Revolution. In 1955, DAR members petitioned Congress with a resolution to set aside September 17th to September 23rd to be dedicated for the observance of Constitution Week. The resolution was adopted by Congress and signed into public law by President Dwight D. Eisenhower on August 2, 1956, although it was only in 2002 that President George W. Bush officially declared the inception of Constitution Week. As members of the Daughters of the American Revolution, we honor the sacrifices of our ancestors by promoting the ideals they fought valiantly to pass down to their descendants. As a part of our commitment to promote study and education about the Constitution, the Dr. Susan Anderson chapter, NSDAR, has placed a display about the Constitution in the Arvada Library and will be placing one Wednesday in Stanley Lake Library. We continue to stock our Little Free Library with educational items focusing on the Constitution in hopes of educating and engaging its visitors around the importance of this document. During this week, we invite you all and the public to view these displays and visit our Little Free Library. We hope many will be inspired to check out some of the books about the Constitution available at all of our libraries to learn more about the important document. It is my privilege as chapter regent to accept this proclamation on behalf of the Arvada-based Dr. Susan Anderson chapter, NSDAR. Thank you for helping us observe the 234th anniversary of the drafting of the Constitution of the United States of America.
Next, we have a presentation from the Arvada Parks Advisory Committee that will give us a quarterly update. And, you know, we're thrilled with the work that our various committees do, and the Parks Advisory Committee is certainly one of them. So,
very good. Good evening, City Council and Mayor. My name is Michael McMahon. I'm one of the members of the Arvada Parks Advisory Committee, and we wanted to give you an update. We try to do it quarterly, but this is probably going to be a semi-annual update. We have some slides for you to review also. Once again, the purpose of our group is to support the city's visions through the lens of the parks master plan. Next slide. So first of all, we'd like to welcome our new committee members, Jackie Marquis and Travis Torline. It's been kind of slow for them coming out of COVID and some of the things that we're doing, but they're very enthusiastic and we look forward to working with them. Our outgoing committee member is Ed Johnson, and he's been on the committee for quite some time. I think a lot of you guys know him. So we'd welcome our new city liaison to the committee, Steve Gustafson. So he's been very active in our monthly meetings, and while he's trying to catch up, he's a relatively new member of the group. He's trying to catch up. He certainly brings with him a lot of enthusiasm, and we look forward to working with him. So, like most people, our COVID restrictions and limitations have limited our meetings, our monthly meetings, to Zoom meetings. So we had one or two, and then we're kind of going back to Zoom. People are a little bit concerned about how things are emerging, and there's no real reason why we have to meet in person. We have had to cancel field trips, volunteer and event projects, and we're looking forward to when COVID releases us that we can do more things in Arvada. Next slide, please. So our accomplishments are based on volunteer hours, and then we have some programs that we also do. So currently, this is a month old, maybe 6 weeks old now. We've had 173 volunteer hours between 16 members. We try to shoot for The program is set up to do 60 hours a year per volunteer member, and that includes evaluating parks, looking at parks, going to meetings, being active. We have had several people present programs to us before they reach the actual city council. Another program that we do and have completed is the matching grant program. As you guys are familiar with the public schools in Arvada, they have an opportunity to apply for a $5,000 grant, and that grant is a matching grant. So they have to come up with $5,000, and then we provide $5,000. We've had a lot of interest in the program. This is the third year I've seen it. So this year we've had the most, and I just wanted to acknowledge the schools and what they got, what they received for their request. And then by next year, we're hoping to go back and have photographs, if you guys are interested, to see what they got. And it's there's a very common theme here. So for Seacrest, a shade structure. So a lot of the schools are leading towards outdoor education. And as we all know, it's really hot if you don't have a shade structure. So that was the theme there. Thompson got boulder seating and a climbing structure. Peck got a shade structure, once again, another outdoor classroom situation. Excel webbing for the space net climbing structure, and everybody should look on, there's a picture of it somewhere, and it's very, very exciting, how grade school toys have changed since I went to grade school, okay? We just didn't have that type of opportunity, so. And then the Moore Middle School, a blacktop maintenance for their basketball court, so they wanted to finish blacktopping it to complete the basketball court that they have there adjacent to the building, I believe, so. And then we had one $3,500 matching grant program for Westwoods, which was for $3,500 for 2 outdoor tables. And of course, these tables, if you've seen them like in the parks, are very structurally intact and coated and safe, and they allow wheelchair access also. All right, so the next slide. So in my few minutes here, I wanted to give you, next slide, please. The accomplishments that we've done. And the accomplishments are based off of our document, which is the 4 pillars, which includes community, wellness, parks, and nature. And each one of those, I'm not going to go into detail, but I want you to understand kind of the guidelines of what we're doing and what we do. And so by representing each area, like community, for instance, so on the next slide, there's an example of community. So we have this working document, if you will, that we do, and we identify different things that need to be done, and then we assign tasks, different members sign up to do that. And so the community probably, I think, is the most important one. A lot of public education, if we can. I know that there's an active current thing for trail etiquette for bicycles, and they want to do a video for it. And being a very involved bicycle rider, we need safer bicycle people out there, because not everybody follows the rules and they're not very careful. And I think that's an important thing to do. Art also is along the ways has been interesting. As we know, that Bay Walls, I ride by that every time I ride in the Ralston Creek, and that's quite an impressive arts program, art project. And talking to them, it was interesting. So we're also looking for a ranger program. We're recruiting to find more ranger program people who are interested in doing that. Ed was a big part of that and has left, and it's left kind of a hole in our program. Our next pillar is nature. Nature is a little bit more limited, but mostly we're interested in because of the drought management plan, and we had a very good presentation last time about that. People are concerned about the drought, but the drought isn't here with us right now, and it is impacting the Western Slope. I was just there this weekend, and it's very dry over there, and the river's really low, and it's interesting to see. But as I've always thought, I've lived here for 30 years, and I've always thought Arvada has been very proactive in saying, no, you need to water, 3 times a week, that's it. We haven't had to do that, and hopefully we won't have to do that. So the next slide, the next pillar would be wellness. And so wellness has to do with the focus on pedestrian, equestrian, and bicycle circulation. So because of the park systems, of course, we want a way to get to these parks and from park to park. And that's part of that same thing. Bike-friendly Arvada has been a big topic in Arvada. And our last one is parks itself. These are all incorporated into parks, but this is about parks. So we're interested in how Arvada acquires their parks, what the parks are made with, and I know there's several opportunities for new parks being built now, what they involve, and to support them, I think, with the water that we have. So we're working with the city to review that. So, and that's really all I have in my 4 minutes. So does anybody have any questions about that?
Ms. Miller?
Thank you, Your Honor. I don't have any questions, but I just want to say thank you so much for your passion and commitment to the Parks Advisory Council. You and your entire team, you're fantastic, and the work that you've done is amazing, and thank you.
All right, very good. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay.
Mr. Pfeiffer?
Actually, I'm going to join the Ranger program, I think, when I'm done.
Are you? Very
Yeah,
good.
I've been a big advocate for that, so maybe when I'm done doing city council, I'll just join the trails, and because I think that's a great program.
Sure, sure.
So, little disappointing that we don't see folks volunteering for that, but maybe we should advertise that some more.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm not sure why either, but they've certainly recruited for it. I've seen it in I think the Arvada papers had it, and it's also the monthly Arvada paper also has it also. So very good. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we'll move on to public comment. I've got some individuals who have signed up. I would remind everyone that public comment is your opportunity to address City Council. It's not a time for City Council to respond back. It's not a time for a debate back and forth. It's an opportunity to hear what's on your mind. It's your 3 minutes, and so we encourage you to use it, and we'll listen attentively. Renee Nelson. Well, why don't we move on to another one and then come back to Ms. Nelson. Mr. Cannon, you're next.
Hi guys, how are you all doing tonight? Appreciate you giving me 3 minutes. The reason I'm here is, as you know, I've been connected with Harvest Festival only for about 40 years now. So I joined the JCs in '81 and immediately started working on Harvest Festival. So, but we're afraid that Harvest Festival is no longer going to exist because, as the city told us, we're just too big for Old Town, and nobody wants us in their residential neighborhoods, and we're afraid. We're afraid that our 95-year-old tradition might be ending. So I'm hoping that council will maybe deliberate on this a bit and help us, because we're not a profit-making organization. In fact, a lot of years we operate in the red, so it's not a thing that we try to make money. We're here to serve the public and try to, carry on this 95-year-old tradition, and we hope that you guys will support us in that. So that's really all I have to say.
Thank you very much. Shirley Criddlebaum?
Thank you. I just want to say that we all miss the festival and the parade. I'm 86. We have 5 generations in my family now, and we all enjoy watching the parade. I went to Lawrence from 2nd grade clear through school in Arvada. I rode to Leva. I worked in the PTA booth for the Job's Daughters, and we just miss it all, and my family loves it, and we've all been here sitting on the curb or wherever watching and loving the parade, and these little kids just absolutely love the parade. So I'm just hoping that in the future, like has been said, we can make it to at least our 100 years. And I thank you for listening. I just missed the festival and the parade. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Renee Nelson?
Good evening, members of council and mayor. We appreciate the time this evening. My name is Renee Nelson. I'm at 5225 Balsam Street, unit number 3, fourth generation Arvadan, and we do have many multi-generational families here today. The festival is often the largest fundraiser and the last of the summer for many of our local groups and organizations. This is for them to make ends meet financially, and this year's permit denial has just pulled the carpet out from under them at the last minute. Our committee members have been stressed, if not distraught and depressed. We work an entire year to help make this community event one of the best in the city. We've taken our lunch hours, we've taken our vacation hours, and it's all on our own time. There's so many community-minded individuals that have been impacted in so many negative ways. Civic groups, scouts, schools. The schools were particularly hit hard after the pandemic. I can't tell you how disappointed the kids were, the bands that weren't able to march. Other nonprofit groups, volunteers that come to the 3-day event to raise money and to support themselves. With so many great local causes, there are too many to mention. The Arvada JCs have sponsored this event every year, and we would like the city of Arvada to please put it back in place. We appreciate your time this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nelson. Anyone else wish to address City Council on public comment? Okay, I've got another individual here.
Good evening, members of City Council. I'm Sandy Martin, the CEO of Community Table, and it's been a while since I've been here, so I wanted to take this opportunity to just touch upon the grant applications that we've submitted through the Human Services.
Actually, that's going to be a public hearing that we'll be doing a little bit later this evening.
Oh.
So we'll have you testify then.
I'm sorry, I was told to be here at 6:15, so. You're right.
Well, we're going to be a little later than that, but we'll get to you. But we do have somebody online.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
We can.
Hi, my name is Christian Ogle. I'm a physician assistant and a resident of the Geos neighborhood in West Arvada. My wife and I moved here in 2019, specifically to live in a fully electrified, solar-powered home for health and climate reasons. We were delighted to find such a forward-thinking community of like-minded and politically engaged neighbors. The home is tightly sealed, well insulated, and our Excel bill is $6 a month year-round. And that also covers charging for our electric car. We found this home via word of mouth in the absence of any effective marketing. The same is true for all our neighbors. We looked at retrofitting our previous home in Westminster, but discovered that building codes from the 1990s would be challenging. So, you see, conventionally built homes must be drafty and inefficient, otherwise dangerous pollutants from gas appliances build up inside and poison the occupants. Pollutants from gas stoves and furnaces include nitrogen dioxide, carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, small particulates, and a variety of carcinogenic benzene compounds. These chemicals increase risk for heart disease, lung disease, dementia, and it's an increasingly unnecessary risk to inflict on the community. Electrification of homes and commercial buildings and transportation is the vanguard of public health. Just last month, the Energize Denver Task Force recommended Denver require electrification of space and water heating equipment at the time of replacement for commercial buildings and multifamily homes beginning in 2024. And Arvada should start looking at that too. Colorado suffers from increasingly worse air pollution related to emissions from transportation, oil and gas drilling, worsening wildfires, and this is going to continue to increase until people in power implement policies to reduce it. Builders and developers will tell you that gas is driven by consumer choice. But when you bought your home or leased your office, did anyone give you a choice about how to heat it? Maybe. If you bought a custom home, maybe. But do the 40% of Arvadans who rent their homes get a choice? Do children with asthma living in them get a choice? The only people making these decisions are corporate executives in the cities that approve them. But I promise you, as taxpayers and voters, we disapprove and we're paying attention. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That's everyone that I have at this juncture. We'll move on to the...
Please, sir.
Yes, sir, if you'll come down. And if you'll state your name and give us your address, please.
Sure. Good evening, City Council members and Mayor. Jesse
Recording in
Kaufman.
progress.
Go ahead.
Jesse Kaufman, 5400 Sheridan Boulevard, number 213. I just wanted to say, that tonight might be the answer, the time to ask questions or get answers.
Recording in progress.
But the question does need to be asked. Why were we forced out of Old Town with the Harvest Festival, which that's where we started from, and we got denied permits, and through the past 5 years, there's been restriction after restriction. We jump all those hurdles, we still get it done. We're not gonna stop, okay, so, especially me. But the same space and area that we got shut down for the Harvest Festival, the streets are shut down now for what? Restaurants, bars, everything else that you can think of, and there's fine, but we're not welcome. So that I do need an answer to that question. Well, it might not be tonight, but that's my goal, is to get that question answered. Look at how many years, 96 years strong, and now all of a sudden we're forced out? Yes, I want an answer why. And then we go to a second location, which the city brought to us. We start replanning all over again after we just got planning 3 months long. And then now we move to the new location, we start trying to plan everything else, and we get denied for that. So I want to answer for that. And you just got to ask yourselves, is this the way you guys want it to end? I mean, you guys have a major pull in this, and I know you guys can help get us back in Old Town where we belong for 3 days out of the year. Because how many traditions are there still alive? So just please think about that, and I hope to hear from all of you at some point in time. Have a good night.
Thank you, sir. The reason we get addresses and names is so that our city team can indeed respond back to inquiries. So you'll be hearing from the city on this.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, I'll move on now to the consent agenda. We have several items. The first is a resolution accepting certain acquired property interests related to the completion of the Ralston Road Phase 1 project. Second is a resolution accepting an annexation petition concerning the northeast corner of Indiana Street and West 82nd Avenue, also known as 8200 Indiana Street, finding said petition substantially compliant with state statute CRS 31-12-1071, and setting a public hearing for October 18, 2021 at 6:15 p.m. for the City Council to determine whether the area meets the requirements of that same state statute 13-12-104 and 105 and is considered eligible for annexation. Next is a resolution authorizing an employment agreement between the City of Arvada and Charles W. Tingle, appointing him as a relief judge for the municipal court. Next is a resolution authorizing the submission of the 2021 Justice Assistant Grant application for the Arvada Police Department. Next is a resolution authorizing a construction contract by and between the City of Arvada and In Situ Form Technologies, LLC, for the 2021 trenchless sewer main replacement project in an amount not to exceed approximately $1.3 million. Next is a resolution authorizing the issuance of a purchase order in the amount of approximately $400,000 to Home Equipment Company for the purchase of one 2019 Vogel Super 1700 paver. And the final consent agenda item is the resolution authorizing an agreement between Arvada and Cobaco Services for an RFP 21 tank repair and seal water treatment tank and apparatus repair in an amount not to exceed approximately $307,000. Mr. Marriott.
Thank you, Your Honor. I move that consent agenda items numbers R21-110 through R21-116 all be approved.
Motions for approval of the consent agenda. All votes are cast. That passes unanimously. Mr. Tingle, you'll have to stick around because now you've been hired, so we have to swear you in here shortly. Next, we have some resolutions. First is Resolution 21-117, resolution authorizing the fourth budget amendment to the 2021 operating and capital budget to increase the budget by $5,537,909 for the funds received from the American Rescue Plan Act.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, the item before you tonight would basically accept the first payment of the American Rescue Plan Act funds, ARPA funds, by that $5,537,909. And what we're also asking tonight is for you to essentially appropriate $2.5 million of that amount for us to move forward with the first activities that we want to use to pay for those or to utilize those funds, which would be $1.5 million for the improvements that are in progress right now in Old Town, in Old Town, that should be completed by the end of this month, and also for brisk pay bonuses for our city team members that continue to work on the front lines in the community through the pandemic. So we're talking about our police officers, public works employees, our parks team members, and others who had to continue to work through during the pandemic time when a number of us were working remotely or were not necessarily having to be out in the public at that time. That's a total of $2.5 million. We will come back to you in the future with some additional recommendations for expenditures of this fund, and as you I think well know, the total ARPA funds that will be contributed to the city of Arvada is about $11.1 million. This is the first tranche, the first payment that we're asking for the allocation for the activities that I just described, and we are of course recommending the resolution.
Ms. Ford.
I'll make a motion if there are no
There are no questions. You may proceed.
I move that R 21-117, a resolution authorizing the fourth budget amendment to the 2021 operating capital budget to increase the budget by $5,537,909 be approved.
Motions for approval. All votes cast. That passes 7-0. Thank you. Next, we have R 21-118, a resolution authorizing the City of Arvada to enter into an intergovernmental agreement with the City of Westminster for fleet maintenance and repair services. Mr. Devon.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, very proud of the efforts of our fleet services team to bring this agreement forward to you. Through their initiative, we have negotiated an intergovernmental agreement with the City of Westminster to partner and collaborate in the area of fleet maintenance. Should we have a situation that arises that may make the Arvada fleet team unable to report to work or provide services or something along those lines, through this intergovernmental agreement, we're collaborating with the City of Westminster to make sure that fleet services can be provided in times of an emergency. We're recommending approval of the agreement.
Very good. Council, question or action? Mr. Pfeiffer?
I'll go ahead and make the motion.
You may proceed.
I move that Resolution 21-118, a resolution authorizing the City of Arvada to enter into an intergovernmental agreement with the City of Westminster for fleet maintenance and repair services be approved. And I do want to make a comment. I think this is great. When you talk about business continuity and resiliency, we have to find these kind of things that if something does shut down, especially with the pandemic, that we have some sort of business continuity plans put in place to keep our services going. So I applaud the team for putting that together, and that's a great innovative contracting.
Yeah, I'll be supporting the motion. Obviously, we've got areas of mutual aid with our surrounding communities and other arenas, and this is certainly a continuation of that. That passes 7-0. Thank you. Next, R 21-119, a resolution authorizing an intergovernmental agreement between Jefferson County, Colorado, and the City of Arvada for access to content provided through an agreement with its Pictionary International Corp. Metry?
I believe it's
Easy
I
for
was
you to
pr-
say,
I was,
huh?
I was rehearsing this earlier today. Pictometry.
Okay, very good, that one.
And Mr. Mayor, members of the council, this is a software that has been used by city team members for the last several years. And previous to this agreement, it was provided through the Jefferson County Emergency Communications Authority. The board did not require an agreement, but that formalized the terms and conditions. And then recently, the Jefferson County Assessor's Office purchased the pictometry software, and they do require an agreement, which is before you tonight. This imagery provides us with many valuable ways for use. Our GIS team will be able to access the imagery software to support engineering design services for projects, capital projects and development projects and things along those lines. So by approving this agreement, we will have access for a useful resource at no additional cost to the city. This is again another example of a intergovernmental collaboration between us and a neighboring agency, and we're recommending approval of the resolution.
Very good, Ms. Simpson.
If there are no questions, I'll make the motion.
You may proceed.
All right, I move that R21-119, a resolution authorizing an intergovernmental agreement between Jefferson County, Colorado and the city of Arvada for access to content provided through an agreement with Pictometry International Corp. be approved.
Motions for approval. All votes are cast. That passes 7-0. Thank you. Final resolution tonight is Resolution 21-120, a resolution authorizing an intergovernmental agreement by and between the City of Arvada and the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development for CARES Act funding in the amount of $682,995. Mr. Devon.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, this is the additional CARES funding that we have received from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development through the pandemic. And these funds would be used to support activities such as rent and mortgage assistance, utility payment assistance, homeless services, and associated with the Jefferson County Regional Program and similar human services programs. This funding continues to support our neighbors in need, provide nonprofit organizations and others with some assistance to continue serving families in our community that need these kinds of services, and we're recommending approval of the resolution.
Ms. Miller.
Happy to make a motion, Your Honor?
You may.
Thank you. I move that R21-120, a resolution authorizing an intergovernmental agreement by and between the City of Arvada and the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development for CARES Act funding in the amount of $682,995 be approved.
Motions for approval. All votes are cast. That passes 7-0. With the reading of that last resolution, you can see why I'm so very disappointed we have no first readings tonight, because the Mayor Pro Tem normally does the first readings, and Ms. Miller's presentation of those are always most entertaining. So we'll move now to the oath of office for Charles Tingle as a relief judge for the City of Arvada. Let me preface this prior to doing the swearing in, that Judge Kurtz, as our presiding municipal court judge, has assembled an excellent team of relief judges. She's got several of them here tonight, and they all do a tremendous job for us, filling in the gap when either the presiding judge is not available or has other obligations, or when we have several matters needing to be dealt with at the same time. And I appreciate all the other relief judges being here tonight to show their support for the swearing in of soon-to-be Judge Tingle. I used to see Judge Charles, he's not sworn in yet, so Charles at the Jeffco District Attorney's Office all the time, and we're thrilled to have you on board.
very excited to introduce Judge Tingle to you and to our community. I had the privilege of working with Judge Tingle at the First Judicial District Attorney's Office. He was there for about 36 years and served both as a Deputy District Attorney, a Chief Deputy District Attorney, and most recently he was the Assistant District Attorney under District Attorney Pete Weir. I'm very excited for him to join our team of amazing relief judges, most of whom are here tonight. He brings an incredible wealth of criminal justice knowledge and experience, and I think it'll be a tremendous asset to our team. So,
just very, very briefly, I'm absolutely grateful for this opportunity. When I first spoke to Judge Kurtz, I was absolutely thrilled to learn that she might be able to use my services. I sat on the Supreme Court and Court of Appeals Nominating Commission for 6 years while I was in the District Attorney's Office, and then the Judicial Performance Commission for the First Judicial District as well. I am very excited to try to fulfill these duties absolutely to the best of my ability, but with integrity, high ethics, and I promise to all the citizens of Arvada, the Mayor, City Council, that I will work tirelessly in this new role, and I'm just grateful for the opportunity. I met a number of folks earlier this evening, and I've got to say it was probably the warmest welcome I've received in a long time. A lot of city employees, the other relief judges who are absolutely magnificent, and others, and I just can't wait to dive in and start working with everyone. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
I'm going to have you sign real quick. Right there.
Preferably in blood.
Well, there could be an issue.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, with that now, we'll do our public hearings. I'll open the public hearing on Council Bill 21029, an ordinance repealing Chapter 10, Amusements and Entertainment of the Arvada City Code. Mr. Devon or Ms. Morris, do you want to explain why we're doing away with amusements and entertainment in Arvada?
I will. I'll see if I can do that. Okay, so the Arvada City Council initially adopted ordinances regulating amusement arcades and other similar businesses in the 1960s. I am told that gaming has changed substantially since then. And when we have gone back and reviewed our code system and the way that we issue licenses, we have determined that the amount of revenue that we receive for these licenses, which is approximately $4,000, is less than the cost for us to administer and issue these licenses. For that and to make us more competitive to businesses that might have arcades and other games in their business facilities, we recommend repealing this particular ordinance and no longer requiring licensing for arcades and amusement centers within the city of Arvada. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any member of the public that would like to address City Council on this issue? Seeing none, I'll close the public comment. I'll ask the first question. Is this an effort to get Chuck E. Cheese back in town? Okay, don't have a good response. Mr. Pfeiffer, you're first.
I'd like to reserve the motion if there's not any questions, but I do have...
You may proceed.
So before I go into my motion, just a quick question. You mentioned into the staff report that there was business inquiring about that. Is that business still staying with Arvada, or did they leave? It kind of was open-ended there.
I assume that they're still staying with Arvada, but the Community and Economic Development Department might be able to speak to that more specifically.
You know, there are a couple of businesses that have arcade-type things, and then this was particularly punitive to them. So I think that working with them and being able to repeal this is going to be able to help not just one business, but several businesses that have these types of gaming devices in their
So yeah, I get the
facility.
existing, but I know there was mention of a new one that kind of brought this to light, and that one is still discussing.
I don't want to answer definitively tonight.
Okay.
I'll
It's just
have to get back
amazing
to
that
you.
this 1960s ordinance is discouraging a business from opening in our city. So I was just curious if they stayed with us, that's all.
My understanding is they are still sticking with Arvada, pending sort of the vote on this.
Oh,
because
no pressure.
because they wanted to have quite a few different machines, and because currently we charge per machine, it was actually, you know, quite a significant amount of money to get into the business on top of all the sales tax and leasing and things like that when our neighboring cities don't charge.
Okay. All right. I'm just curious. Thank you very much. If there's no other questions,
You may proceed with the motion.
Thank you. I move that Council Bill 21-029, an ordinance repealing Chapter 10, Amusement and Entertainment of the Arvada City Code, be approved on final reading number 4776 and ordered published by title only.
Motions for approval. All votes are cast. Let the record reflect that the Arvada City Council has done away with amusements and entertainment. Now, we haven't done away with them. It just doesn't cost you to have to get to do them here in Arvada. That would be a better way of putting it. Thank you. Passes unanimously. Next, we'll open the community comments on the application process for the 2020 Community Development Block Grant, 2022 Annual Action Plan, and 2022 Human Services Funding Pool. Mr. Devon?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, the housing team is preparing the 2022 annual action plan that's required by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. The proposed action plan shall be submitted by November 15th, 2021 to HUD. And then concurrently with that, or about concurrently with that, the city's Human Services Advisory Committee is also preparing recommendations for the 2022 funding from the Human Services Funding Pool. And a combined public hearing is needed where the community, public agencies, and other interested parties are able to present proposals for the City Council for CDBG funds and other city funds that make up the Human Services Funding Pool, and also to comment on the proposed 2022 Annual Action Plan. So we're recommending tonight that you open the public hearing and that public testimony be taken and then the hearing be closed as we continue the process.
Very good. Yes, this is an opportunity to get these presentations. We'll have our committee involved in this process make recommendations back to City Council. So, Sandy Martin, now's your chance. Good evening.
Good evening. Sandy Martin, CEO of Community Table. Thank you very much for the opportunity to make a few comments about our 2 grant applications. First of all, I would like to thank Mayor Williams and members of City Council for the support that you've given us in the past. With COVID having hit the last year and a half, we've been very busy. We are one of few human service agencies that did not close down because we are an emergency service provider with food for those members of our community that don't have enough food and are food insecure. So we shut down our store because it was difficult to get people in with masks and 6-foot distancing, etc. But we did a drive-through box delivery system and fed quite a few people through that box delivery system. A year ago, July 9th, we opened up our store again, but continued the box distribution as well, because there are still people that do not feel comfortable coming in to shop. So we are seeing, just with the month of August, to give you an idea, we saw 600 families come in for food just through our Client Choice store, which is equates to about 1,500 members of the community, individuals. So the numbers are going up, and people that make up that income level are about 15,900. So the federal level is 26,200. So these are really low of the low that are coming in to get this food assistance. And it's been beneficial to them to do that. We also opened up another mobile pantry, so we now have 3, and we are getting ready to open a 4th to assist folks, and primarily seniors and Arvada, our Latinx community, who do not want to come in to see us, but we take food to them. And we are getting requests to do more of those, and we are going to meet that demand because we think that is where we need to be to make sure people are getting fed. We have also continued our backpack program and are seeing, we will be, this past year we served 27 schools and gave out 43,000 pounds of food to those kiddos. So it was a little challenging to be able to deliver that food to the schools with them shut down. So we delivered the food to the schools and the families picked them up there. And we had a donor that just loves the program so much that donated funds through a grant process for us to be able to buy these little incentive bags for the kids once they're signed up for the program. So it's a little backpack, kind of fits the theme of the program. We have open 2 Saturdays in the month to do boxes as well, because as I said, the demand has gone up, and this is a very important year for us. Our client financial assistance, which gives people the opportunity to get rent assistance, has gone up 37%. I just signed six checks today for people for rent assistance of almost $5,000. So, and that's in the last week. So that tells you how much the need is. So if we've ever needed you before, we need you now. And I will hope you will look favorably upon our grant request. We really need your help so we can help those members of the community that are struggling.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Next, we have Karen Allen from Beyond Home. Good evening.
Good evening. Can you all hear me okay? All right, thanks. I, first of all, do want to thank the mayor, the city council, everyone from the Arvada Housing Authority who, the city of Arvada has supported Beyond Home in amazing ways. And we have rebranded, so some of you may still know us as Colorado Homeless Families. We've been around for 34 years now. We provide the transitional housing for families that are either experiencing homelessness or they're at imminent risk. So those folks whose rent has gone up and they don't know where that extra $100 a month is going to come from. They're doubled up. Somebody's living in their sister's living room with their 2 little kids. Those are the kind of families that come to us. And one of the things that I really love about the city of Arvada is that it is so family friendly. I mean, this is a place where I'm from the Midwest. It feels like a Midwest town where everybody works together for the support of everyone else. And we have that going at Beyond Home, where we have a community. We have 40 apartment units and a program that helps each of those families be able to get to the point of being self-sufficient for life. So there are a lot of organizations that have a lot of little mottos and things. So I always feel the need to define self-sufficient for life. From our point of view, self-sufficient for life means they are solely providing for their families forever. So no TANF, no WIC, no food stamps, no other support from the government. And it takes a while for our families to be able to go from that point of they don't even have a home to being able to really provide for themselves ongoing. The program is a long-term program, and the support that we get from the city of Arvada is one of the key components to our being able to continue those support pieces that we do. Very intensive trauma-informed counseling, very intensive case management. One of the biggest improvements for the lives of our families comes from the opportunity to do very good career counseling through Red Rocks Community College. And it gives them a vision for, they know this many jobs. Once they get that career counseling, they know that there are this many jobs that they could be good at. And then they start training for those. They enroll in college, they enroll in certificate programs, they enroll in a trade school program. But it really allows them to get to the point where they're feeding their families. They're able to go. Last year we had 9 families graduate from Beyond Home. 6 of those families bought their own home, first-time home buyers. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any via Zoom?
Good evening. Can you hear me?
We certainly can. Go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor Williams and council members. I'm Margot Sobosinski. I'm the executive director and one of the pediatric nurse practitioners at Caron Clinic. We, as you know, probably are located at 51st and Allison, and we're a clinic that provides primary health care to low-income children. We had about 2,100 visits last year, and now with the COVID, you can imagine how much more important it is for the kids to have a place to get their health care. We've been serving low-income children in Arvada for over 25 years. So we do immunizations, well child care, sick care, and now we're also offering COVID testing, as well as in the process to be able to administer COVID vaccines to people that want them. So we did apply again for the CBDG grant, and I would appreciate your consideration and appreciate your previous help, and hope you can continue to help us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I've been informed we have no other individuals signed up. Anybody else wish to provide testimony on this issue tonight? Seeing none, I'll close the public comment portion on this. It will be referred to our Human Services Advisory Committee, who have done a great job. They've developed a matrix system so that they can look at these grants and evaluate these grants, and then come back with recommendations to City Council. And it's been a great process, and we're appreciative of both the applicants who apply and certainly the expertise from our Human Services Advisory Committee to give us guidance on how to allocate the limited funds that we have available. With that, we have a workshop. Mr. Devon?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we're going to provide you with an update on the Land Development Code. We're going to start with Director of Community and Economic Development, Ryan Sichelski.
Evening, sir.
Excuse me. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Thanks so much for having us. Thanks for squeezing a workshop into your busy schedule. We appreciate you taking the time during a business meeting to do the workshop. We have a new land development code. That land development code was approved in May of 2020, and when you do a long ordinance like this, over 400 pages, you learn some things as you enact it. And so today, today's update is not about that we've made any tragic mistakes or tragic flaws in the Land Development Code, but rather it's an opportunity to say, you know, there's some typos or there's some small modifications that we want to go over with you. So whenever you have one of these long ordinances, about 12 to 18 months after you go through it, you kind of take a step back and you review it and you say, okay, what did we learn? What could we have done a little bit better? So Rob Smetana is here, and he's going to go over what items stood out to us to get your direction and feedback, and based on that conversation, we will bring back an ordinance amendment based on your thoughts. So, Rob Smetana, thank you.
All right, thank you, Mayor, members of council. As Ryan said, next slide, please. As Ryan mentioned, we've been using the code for about a year, a little over a year, and we've identified a number of minor changes and a very small number of major changes that we feel are appropriate to the code to bring in front of you. I'm sure you noticed there were about 97 pages with modifications on them. Again, most of those were very minor, some misspellings, some wrong table references, things like that. But I'll go through the 16 or so that felt were major changes. But just wanted to also give you the peace of mind that we feel that the administration of the new LDC has been very successful to this point. Next slide, please. So I'll just run through quickly the more significant changes, and feel free to stop me if you have any questions along the way. First one up, animal daycare and training as a conditional use in the RA district. We had previously allowed kennels in the RA district, felt that this particular use is no more impactful than a kennel would be, and we have had a couple of folks interested in running businesses within the RA district. So we're suggesting that change to allow the animal daycare and training. In terms of kennels, one thing that wasn't clear in the code is that we had assumed it would be clear in the code that you could have a caretaker residence associated with a kennel, but we had a couple of questions come up around that, so we are recommending that that just be clarified in the code, that you can have a caretaker for a kennel business. Next slide. Revising the distance, food and retail truck vending uses can be from a residential or mixed use building or home. The way the code currently reads is that you have to be a certain distance away from a residential zone district. And as we found through the pandemic, a lot of neighborhood organizations and HOAs wanted to bring in food trucks into their park areas. And we found that we went ahead and let a number of those occur and found that it didn't create a lot of issues. So what we're proposing is to change the distance from a zoning district boundary to a use. So you could be no more than 50 feet from or you could be no less than 50 feet from a home or mixed-use building that has residential uses in it. We've made some clarifications and rewritten some language regarding landscape surface area and amenitized landscape area. This was just, we noticed a few issues in the definition of common open spaces, and it really wasn't clear what had to be amenitized, what could just simply be open landscaped areas. So we've revised a couple of sections of the code to be more specific about active and passive landscape areas. Next slide. Parking for townhome units. When we wrote the code originally, we kind of lumped townhome units in with duplex and single-family detached units. Through reviewing a number of projects, we had originally assumed that the market would help take care of the guest parking needs for particular uses and particular projects. What we found in reviewing a number of projects is that the market didn't necessarily provide the parking spaces that we felt were appropriate. So we are recommending that the parking requirement for townhomes be increased from 2 spaces per unit to 2.2 spaces per unit. That would allow a minimum number of guest parking spaces. That is still below what we had in the previous code, which was a requirement for 2.5 spaces per unit. And this hopefully gives a little bit of ability to get those guest spaces. The one thing we didn't necessarily consider is the fact that we usually in a single family or duplex situation, you have a driveway where those guest parking spaces can be located. You don't necessarily always get that with townhome units. Expanding the off-site parking distance restriction. So we discovered with one case that you recently saw a conditional use for, which was an off-site parking area for a multifamily building, that we had probably reduced the distance that parking spaces within that off-site parking lot had to be. So we originally had a requirement that parking could be no more than 300 feet from the use that it would provide services for. Well, if you look at big box retailers, you actually have parking spaces that are on that lot that are up to 500 feet away from the front door. So we're proposing to revise that distance that a parking space can be located from the use it serves. At the same time, though, reducing the distance that the edge of the parking lot can be from the use it serves. And that would reduce that from 300 feet to 200 feet to, again, try and get that proximity while still allowing a little more flexibility for that parking location.
I have a quick question around that, Mayor.
Sure.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Fimer.
So, I think of some of the hearings we've had where we've been concerned with the spacing of visitor parking in, say, townhome development is one that pops in my head. So when you say use, the distance is from what exactly? Is it the last building closest to it? So I'm thinking of a townhouse community, and they put the parking on the far edges of it, but yet there's none in the center. How does that address that scenario?
Yeah, well, we have two situations. In the situation where it's a townhome project, we do have requirements built in to where guest parking can be on site.
Okay.
So this
would be off-site, so
yeah, it could
like
be
across the
off-site.
street
So
or
yeah,
something.
this is more to deal with a situation like, as I mentioned, the one you saw where we had a multifamily building. They had to utilize some parking across the street in order to meet their parking requirement. Okay. And so that was to address that situation.
Okay, so it doesn't really address, I guess, the townhouse scenario that I was thinking of.
It doesn't necessarily, but it could, depending on if they required off-site parking as well.
All right, thank you.
Next slide, please. We have some clarification regarding bicycle parking to better differentiate between short-term and long-term requirements for the bicycle parking. And it really has to do with the requirements for covered parking, bike parking when it's long-term versus short-term. There was some confusion how those two pieces overlapped. This is hopefully just some cleanup to that. Buffer yard requirements as it relates to dwelling unit types and the RN zone district. So we've run into a few situations where we've had residential uses, but of different densities adjacent to one another, and determined that it was appropriate to have a landscape buffer between those, just given the different nature of the densities involved. So we wanted to clarify that situation by adding some new zone districts where landscape buffers are required between uses. Next slide, please. Lighting, we've gone back and taken a look. We did hopefully simplify the lighting standards from the previous code, but we found a few things that we thought could even be simplified even further within this code. And to avoid confusion, a lot of those had to do with ratios of lighted areas versus dark areas and trying to keep a more uniform light ratio across the site. We found that we may have overshot and made it a little too dim, so it allows for a little more flexibility in lighting. We wanted to clarify the location of accessory dwelling units on interior lots. As you know, we had a lot of conversations about on corner lots and where accessory dwelling units could be located primarily at or behind the front plane of those homes on corner lots. But we discovered that really the same things should apply on interior lots as well. So we're recommending that change.
Rob, can I ask you a question about that one?
Yeah.
One, I know the corner lot issue that we're talking about, but this one on an interior lot, have we faced that as a problem before?
We've run into one instance where they were looking to do the ADU in front of the primary house.
In front, okay. And is that, would this apply to both ADUs that are detached as well as attached?
It would only apply to detached.
Only to detached, okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Okay.
Attached would just need to meet
The setback anyway,
requirements
yeah,
of the
okay.
standard building.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Next slide, please. We're looking at a revised section as it relates to electric vehicle charging stations. We have seen a number of applications recently for smaller scale charging facilities at grocery stores and big box stores. But we anticipate with the increase in number of electric vehicles that we may see larger facilities. So we are adding some language in, or recommending some additional language that talks about those larger facilities when you may get 10 or more charging stations, and treating those more like a fuel filling station. So they would need to meet the same setbacks versus the smaller scale ones that we've allowed to be just behind the front setback, where you may get 1 or 2 charging stations. So it allows some flexibility based on the scale of those facilities. And then minor defects related to public hearing notice requirements. In the previous code, we had a little more flexibility for City Council and Planning Commission to look at minor defects in noticing and determine whether they would have an impact on the hearing taking place that particular evening. Under the current code, we took away a lot of that flexibility, which in somewhat may penalize applicants when they tried to meet the noticing requirements and there was some issue that they maybe could not control or were not aware of. And so this just brings back the flexibility that they can present their case for making proper notice with only minor defects to Planning Commission or City Council, and then either body can determine whether the intent of the hearing notice was met. Next slide, please. Expanding the site plan criteria as it relates to project amenities to include additional zoning districts and housing types. So the way the code is currently written, in evaluating a project, the approval criteria talked about amenities within the MX or mixed-use zoning districts. Obviously, we're going to have larger scale projects in some of the other residential-only districts, and we missed that part of the code. So we wanted to just make sure that we allowed project amenities to be considered as part of the approval criteria as it relates to the scale of those projects, so that we can have more complete communities with amenities versus some of the things we've seen are a small area on the corner of a property with a bench or two or a picnic table. We think depending on the scale of projects, we would request additional amenities beyond those smaller scale, and this gives us the criteria to request those as part of a project. Notice of administrative decision. So the code currently requires for an administrative application a notice of administrative application at the beginning of a project when an application is first submitted. However, as it goes through the review cycles, those projects can change. So this would allow the director at his or her discretion to require a notice of the decision being made, so that if a project has morphed over time and changed, the community, the most impacted neighbors, would have an opportunity to comment on that latest iteration of the plan before a decision is made. So this would allow, again, at the discretion of the director, for a notice to be mailed by the applicant 10 days prior to that decision being made, and that would then, again, allow for additional public comment based on the plan that's before the director to be approved versus that initial plan that did come in. Next slide, please. Finally, we looked at revising a number of definitions. They're listed here. A lot of those we talked about in brief earlier. Probably the three that we have not touched on would be the heavy logistics center, light industry, and semi-trailer truck trip. So there was some discrepancies between uses and the semi-trailer truck trip, as we looked at a case earlier this year. So this is really about clarifying the number of truck trips and the type of truck associated with each one of those. So heavy logistics center would be more than 50 semi-trailer truck trips in and out of a facility. So that's a more intense use, a little more scrutiny, requires some conditional use in areas that light industry would not. Light industry would then be less than 50 semi-trailer truck trips per day. And that's what we had in the code today. But there was some discrepancy between the light industry and the heavy logistics center as it related to what type of truck. One said semi-trailer truck, one just said truck. So we're clarifying that so they both refer to the same type of use.
Okay, my lights are going off on this.
Okay.
Mr. Pfeiffer, you're first.
Well, maybe it's premature, but did we address, I almost feel like we should be addressing like average daily trips from the facility. So when we talk about vans or delivery vans, how is that calculated in this discussion?
It would be included in the number of trips, but it does not count towards or against the truck traffic.
So if I have 25 semi-trailer truck trips, but I have 1,000 delivery vans, that's still considered light?
It would be, because we do allow for fleet vehicle
we don't
assembly,
put a limit.
and we do not count.
We don't have a threshold in that limit?
We do not, but it still counts towards their, when they're doing a traffic study, those trips would be counted into that traffic study, but we don't have any specific restrictions on the number of fleet vehicles that can be stored on a site.
Yeah, I would look to the council to kind of consider average daily trips from the site, not necessarily on the road, but how many trips are coming off the property. Because I don't recall one time that we've ever turned anything down because of a traffic study from some traffic engineer in front of us to say that it only adds 10% to it. That's what we always hear. It's usually around 5 or 10%. But I think when we think back about the situations we're referring to, that situation, it's hard when you have a fleet, 1,500 or whatever vans leaving the site. I almost feel like there needs to be another measurement mixed in here. Maybe it's a combination, but at the end of the day, I don't think we should solely base it on semi-trailer truck. We should also talk about average daily trips that are leaving and coming to the site. And I don't know how that could be mixed in or calculated, but that scenario, the parking ratio was way out of whack for the community in that area, for the other industrial area. And so I just feel like there's something there that was missing that could have helped us be a little bit more informed in regards to what's considered heavy versus light, not just semi-trucks. So I think we need to do a little bit more homework on that.
Yeah, I'm not sure the answer to that one.
Yeah, I don't know what it could be, but there has to be
definitely
some formula mixed in there somewhere.
Mr. Marriott?
Thank you, Your Honor. So I agree completely with Mr. Pfeiffer. I think using only one measure as an empirical measure of the difference between light industry and heavy industry, or two measures, my layman's look at it is 50 or less or 50 or more semi-truck trailer trips yields light industry versus heavy industry, or activities that happen outside with the exception of parking fleets, but yet there's no limits or no scale of those things that are allowed. And I think that's where we have a problem if we're trying to empirically define these things. It's like saying if you have 49 semi-trucks, then the rest of the delivery van traffic from here could be unlimited as long as it's only less than this one measure. And I don't think that's probably appropriate. So I would agree with Mr. Pfeiffer. I think we need to look at this in more depth, and both the definition between light industry and heavy industry. I think the storing fleet vehicles outside when it's minimal to the use, like a plumbing company that has a dozen plumbing vans outside, doesn't give me any heartburn at all. But if it was a business that stored 9,000 rental cars outside or something, that's completely different. But yet we don't have anything in our code that would differentiate those, and I think they're clearly different. So I would encourage us to look a little more in depth about these, further refine and define these, just so that the businesses and development community can have, you know, more certainty, more assuredness that that where they're trying to locate is appropriate for them to locate. So again, this piece I would think we ought to look at a little more in depth.
Ms. Miller?
Thank you, Your Honor. I just caution us on these definitions, or else we're going to put all of our post offices out of the business because of their fleets that leave there and go in every direction. So we just got to be very careful if we have one company in mind that we're not handicapping others.
Mr. Pfeiffer?
Can I add a little bit more? And maybe, I mean, that's a valid point. Hopefully they don't have 9,000 or 1,000 vehicles going in and out. But, you know, one of the issues that caused my concern around this was it was like 6 or 7 or 8 times what our parking ratio was for that. And that rose a flag for me when it's 6+ times more than our requirements. When we're always trying to pull it down, not push it up. And maybe that could be mixed in that conversation when you're trying to figure out a balance that you cannot exceed more than 3 times the parking ratio, or some way to put some cap in there. And if there is something that exceeds the cap, it comes and sees council around it. But maybe that's, instead of doing the trips, maybe it's more of number of parking spaces associated to the property, okay. A cap.
My sense on this one is that we'll have to go back to the drawing board a little bit and put some more work into this. I do think that because of the confusion, I think you've done a good job in trying to distinguish between semi-trucks and trucks, but these delivery vans and smaller, larger than a pickup truck type of thing did cause us some consternation last go around, and I think it would be better if we could get it ironed out. So let's keep working on that one, and you know, we'll have council put their thinking caps on, but we'll certainly defer to you as the real experts, you know, to give us some good guidance and suggestions moving forward on how to better address the distinction between light and heavy industrial.
Sounds good. Yeah, we'll definitely take a look at that and come back with you with some solutions.
Great.
All right.
Okay, is there anything else from council? Does that complete your?
There were
I knew
just
you
a couple
saved the
of,
best for
yeah,
last.
a couple of topics for discussion, but if there were anything else that anybody had with the code itself.
Mr. Jones, did you wish to?
I just had one question about the notice parameter. Are we still at 500 feet?
It is 500 feet, or anybody who provided comment previously, or anybody that the director determines to have standing.
Is there any reason why that shouldn't be more, or take into consideration a wider radius? Because, again, if you take into thought, you know, this one particular hearing that we were referencing, there's not a lot of residential in a 500-foot radius, and so it seems to me like we ought to make it a half a mile, 3/4 of a mile, and why wouldn't we want more notice?
I think it is something we could look at scale-wise, but you know, in some areas of town that may be several thousand units. Some areas of town it may be a couple dozen. Right. So it's just making it kind of a level playing field. It's always the difficult part.
I would just ask that you look at that and come back with maybe a different tiered approach to notice based on project size, scope, and who it would impact.
Ryan, you jumped up. Yeah, did you have some?
You know, there's a couple things I want to mention. So I appreciate that. So 500 feet is the minimum. I know for some projects, those developers choose to go larger. One of the areas is you're trying to strike that balance. One of it is related to cost. So when you're mailing, you know, notice to 200 folks, that's fine, that's 200 folks. But if you have a half a mile area and you're in the, you know, the heart of the city or whatever, and you're doing 2,000 or 3,000 households, you know, that can be a pretty extensive cost. And depending on who the developer is, because remember, we require notice for all administrative cases. And so if you are doing an ADU and you're just a homeowner doing an ADU, and now that's a half a mile, and it's $1,500 in order to mail out all these notices, that's going to be burdensome on that particular homeowner. So cost is part of it. The other thing I wanted to mention is that, while the developer is required to do this notice, we, on all cases, also put out notice in other ways too. We are on Nextdoor, we are on other social media. Our community and economic development communications manager is really good at pushing things out. So we don't rely on a one-stop shop. The notice is not the only way that information gets out. So I would just also look at that. So we can certainly look at another number, but that's not the sole way that we want information to be out.
And I certainly appreciate that and know that the city does a good job. But I think that the burden is on the developer, and they ought to, make sure that whatever the notice requirement is, if it's some number of feet bigger than 500 feet, it's their burden to prove, and you would think they're going to want feedback. I think we can have better projects with more feedback.
Sure.
Or better community feedback and involvement.
Fair enough.
But there's also the valid point, I think, Mr. Jones, that if it is an ADU on a residence, so maybe there should be some distinction between type of use or project.
Commercial scale, those types of things.
Exactly.
And we can take a look at that and see if there's some sort of gradient or something like that that works.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Okay, Ms. Simpson.
Thank you, Mayor. Actually, Mayor, you stole my point.
Great minds think alike, you know.
That's what I was going to say, particularly in response to ADU. 500 feet may even be too much for such a small modification to someone's private property. So I was thinking, but perhaps it's 1,000 feet or 1,500, maybe not half a mile. That does seem a bit excessive. However, I've had numerous constituents when something's coming up in their neighborhood who didn't get a notice, who have called me upset that they weren't, like, why was it so small? 500 feet does feel a little small. So maybe it's 1,000 or 1,500. We'll rely on your expertise. But I agree with Mr. Jones that for some of these larger projects that are going to have an expanded impact, particularly if we're looking at anything with maybe more than 100 cars impact, then a wider notice should be done. And then going on to a next gear, I apologize, but I was hoping you guys could walk me through the urban versus suburban townhome distinctions, because that's something that comes up a lot, and I don't think a lot of people are really keenly aware of what the differences are between those two designs. So.
Sure. Really, there's two distinctions. One is the width of a unit. Suburban units require a larger footprint width-wise. I don't remember the numbers right off the top of my head, but the urban allows for a narrower situation, a smaller footprint. Suburban requires a slightly larger distance. And then the setbacks between buildings, they're larger for suburban than they are for urban.
Perfect. And then the reason why I asked specifically is we're looking at residential 6-lot and building standards, and I see that urban has been cut from those, so those will not be allowed to be built there.
That's correct. We found that as an error. We didn't intend to allow for urban in what is really a suburban district. We haven't had any proposals for that yet, so we're in good shape, but we did find that was an error, and we did not intend to have urban within what should be a more suburban district.
Okay, perfect, but they remain for R13 and R24.
Correct.
Okay, thanks, Rob.
Okay, there's no other lights. You can complete your presentation.
Okay, and then last slide, please. So I'm going to start with the second one first, and then we'll get to the first one here. So my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is there was just a little bit of anxiety about how we address the conditional use process and what type of information the council is seeing to make that decision. Am I on the right track there? So a conditional use really is, especially in the residential situation where you've seen most of those, is really to determine if a particular type of residential use is appropriate at a given location. But at the staff level, we're diving into that a little deeper, because one of the approval criteria is that you need to show that the city's system, whether that be water, sewer, streets, is equipped in that area to handle the development that's proposed, and that it's consistent with the development that surrounds that, and that any mitigation is appropriate, or any appropriate mitigation is provided. So when staff is looking at an application, we do ask for a conceptual plan rather than just, is a particular townhome project or a single-family project, single-family attached, say, is it appropriate in a given location? We're actually getting a conceptual plan, and we're also getting conceptual reports, preliminary reports, to help us guide you in making that decision. So we do get preliminary drainage studies, we do get preliminary traffic studies, we get preliminary grading sometimes if we feel that that could potentially be a concern on a site, so that we can evaluate that at the staff level and then come to you and say, we feel that it can or cannot meet the requirements of the criteria. So we are getting a lot of background information that you don't necessarily see. Generally, when it comes to you, you'll get the conceptual plan, you'll get the staff report that kind of summarizes all of those elements. But we did want you to know that from a staff level, we are getting the more detailed documents to help us hopefully guide you in whether it's appropriate or not for a particular use.
Mr. Marriott, you're first.
Thank you, Your Honor. So Rob, this one to me, I think we've struggled with this with a couple of conditional use hearings over the last year. And my look on it is, I think we have some confusion or probably misalignment between the council, our citizens, the staff, and the developers. And to me, it really boils down to this question of, is this conditional use general or is it specific? And I'll take the example of the old Kmart site as an example of that. If the general question might simply be, is any residential use appropriate on that site? And so if the developers are thinking of it in a general terms, that'd be the question they're asking and looking for an answer to. If the staff also thinks of it in general terms from the council, then that would also be the question they would be asking of the council. But as a council person, I feel like for myself personally that I would rather these conditional uses be specific, so specific to a certain proposal, not to just any proposal that contains this one use. And I think more importantly, I feel that way because I believe the citizens, the people who elected me, that's what they want me to have. They don't want me to be giving just general approval like, yeah, I'm okay with residential being there and without limits. I think their vision is that their representatives have specific approval there. So I think that's where, to me, the fundamental question on this conditional use that we need to come to agreement on or some specificity on about what are we doing. And again, I'll bring up the Kmart project, and granted this was only me that did this, but the developer produced two different proposals. For me on the conditional use process, I was for one of the proposals and not for the other. So it was clearly, for me, that conditional use was specific to a certain proposal. But I get the sense, as we've seen these, that that's not the case for at least the developers. And so I don't know kind of where the staff falls in there, but I think that if we can nail that down and come to agreement on that, that we'd all be in a better place. And I would submit that we ought to think about what the citizens want as maybe being the most important decision in there, and try to come up with a process that's like that. So.
Sure, and I think we fall more on your side of when we're talking with developers about what they should be submitting and what level of detail they provide. I think where we get some pushback and some concern, and this is not from the direction that you just provided, but we do get some pushback about, well, we don't want to get too deep into architecture because we haven't made our decisions on that yet, and we don't want that to be part of it. But certainly use, yes. Generalized layout, definitely. Anything that would be required under the code, in terms of buffers, as we talked about, or some generalized landscape area. We want to make sure you see that so you can get the full picture as a particular project may relate to code criteria. So I think we're definitely pushing people towards your direction, but we have, like as I mentioned, gotten pushback on the smaller details with people not wanting to go to that level if they don't know their use is going to get approved yet.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Pfeiffer?
So I'd like to add on to what Mr. Marriott said. I think where I struggle with some of these when we reflect is the fact that, you know, the reason we ask for conditional use is because it's a mixed use zoning, right? So the intent of this area is to be, you know, somewhat, I don't want to put percentages around everything, but let's just assume 50% at least commercial retail and 50% residential. And I think where I struggle with some of this conversation is the fact that we are painting, so when we do land use, right, we're painting what we expect to happen in this zone or these areas, right? And it kind of goes along with my whole beef I have around commercial being eroded away over time, and we don't always know because we always forget that we just converted commercial to residential, and we did it again and again and again, and then we never have a commercial, or industrial is very small. And so in the scenario, if we were to use the scenario that Mr. Marriott was talking about, I think there has to be some sort of percentage specific to the request, at least something, you know, in there that helps be informed. In that case, I think the concern, if I recall correctly, that my peers had were around how minimal use the commercial was and how grand the residential was. And that's a mixed use area, and we were giving up prime retail space along a major corridor. So I think what I'm asking from the team would be to put some more specific site development requests around percentages, if they can't give us exacts, but, you know, really remember the vein of it is it's commercial retail. It's not residential with retail. It's retail commercial with residential. So I think we need to flip it on its head and think about how you're presenting that to us. The other thing is I still will always ask, I want to know what eroded over time, because if I took the Kmart and we made it 90% residential, and then let's just, for example, the next property over does the same thing, and the next property does it again, the next over, all the councils before us will forget that we had so much mixed use, and now we've eroded it all completely away to residential, and then, you know, we're not having sustainable communities anymore with tax revenue and other things. So I want to make sure we wrap that conversation to have more depth and breadth of when we make decisions, that we at least are aware of previous decisions in the area and compatibility. Because I could see, you know, if the residential came back, I don't know what it'd be zoned. Would it still be zone mixed, I guess, still, even though there's a little commercial, that Kmart area, right?
Yeah.
So it would still be considered mixed. Yeah. I guess there's some constitution or institutional knowledge there still, but you know, I don't know what the right answer is, but that area always seems to be a blind spot for me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's the same discussion we had out off of Indiana.
Right, exactly, same thing.
And in that same vein in which, you know, I think I made the reference that, you know, death by 100 cuts or whatever.
Right.
As you keep losing, as you keep carving off sections to go more and more residential, then you don't. And so, yeah, it does make some sense to have some absolute, if not absolutes, but some pretty strong indication of this amount is going to remain in commercial or
retail,
yeah,
you know, or boutique or whatever. But yeah, I just, something there just always gets me, you know, on these topics. And I'm always trying to think about what the future councils will, and I always try to think about what's, you know, what did we do right next door? Mm-hmm. And if we're dwindling our potential of tax revenue and stuff, then how do we create a sustainable community, you know, or a resilient community, you know? So that's my concern around it. So, and that's in addition to what Mr. Marriott said, because I concur with what he said as well.
Yeah. And we did, when we were drafting the LDC, we did have a fairly robust conversation with the advisory groups and with the public on, should we have a percentage, and how is that percentage determined? And we're certainly happy to look at that again, but the discussion focused on, well, should we be looking at property by property, or should we be looking at area? And when you're looking at area, that gets really difficult to try and deal with percentages. And so ultimately, we didn't include percentages in the code, but we're happy to reevaluate it.
Can I just add a little bit more? Let me give a good example that I remember. When we did the Walmart, you know, that whole area was mixed use, right? Both sides of Ralston, I believe it was mixed use for both. And because I remember the very late night, that night, the concern that some people voted against, or an individual voted against it, was the fact that there was no, it was kind of opposite issue. There was no housing on there. There was no residential whatsoever when it was supposed to be mixed use. Well, then we were always told, well, across the street we'll get mixed use and still have kind of a town center feel. And it kind of came around, took 10 years, but we kind of got around to it, and it's happening. But if there was no institutional knowledge of that conversation of what happened on the Walmart, and then we were making decisions on the north side of Ralston Road, then, you know, how do we, that's probably a real live example. I think it worked out fine, and we have to have some room of adaptability, but we also need to kind of, in a way, kind of hold to the way we, you know, I always think of our zoning as like paint by numbers, and you're trying to create these zones because you want to create a sense of place and vibrant communities. And so, you know, if it takes 10, 15, 20 years to get there, there needs to be some linkage between that. Sure. You know, granted, that's probably the only example I can think of that I've seen almost cradle to grave with that one.
Okay, thanks.
Ms. Simpson?
Thank you. So appreciate Mr. Pfeiffer and Mr. Marriott's comments. They kind of inspired a different thought train over in my own head. It was just about the strategy of making sure that everything is very consistent with the existing neighborhoods. This is something we see over on the east side a lot because it is so mature. Mm-hmm. So when infill comes in, it can sometimes cause consternation amongst the residents, to put it bluntly. And so just when we look at what fits, how do we, because zoning, as Bob used it, it's paint by numbers. And so that we have this general thing, and it looks really smart and simple on paper, but once you actually get down into the weeds, and I sometimes mean the literal weeds, it may not make as much sense as it did on the surface. And so I just always want us to sometimes we maybe need to go property by property and say, does this make the most sense and within this area? And so I always encourage us to continue digging deeper into the details and just making sure that every parcel, when we look at it and say, does this specific item fit in this specific place, or is it going to be completely incongruous with what is already surrounding it? And so I just want to really encourage us to stand strong on that, to make sure that every single parcel is zoned appropriately. And I think probably the vast majority of them are, because I know we did so much work. But and this has come to every member on this council, we've had a handful come up to us here and there. And so I just encourage us once again to go back and look at any parcels that maybe saw a dramatic change in their zoning and just reevaluate if it does make the most sense for that piece. So thanks, guys.
Sure. Mr. Marriott?
Thank you. I just had one additional question. My colleague spurred it on. In the mixed-use zoning, our concept for that is it could be commercial, all, could be residential, all, or it could be a mix of the two.
Correct.
Okay. I just wanted to be clear on that definition, that the mixed-use zoning doesn't require a mix of the two. Right. It could be one or the other, or a mix anywhere in between there. Okay.
That's correct. But we do also refer back to the comprehensive plan that also has some discussion around what mixed use means. And that's where we get to, our philosophy has been looking at it as a holistic, not parcel by parcel, but area by area. And that's where we would definitely come to you and say, you know, we've said it was supposed to be mixed use. We're now on the 4th or 5th residential only project. That may or may not comply with the comprehensive plan any longer, and that's one of the criteria you can use to evaluate a project.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, we're finally to the point of no more lights.
All right. Well, and I thought I was getting the easy one. I believe Rachel or Emily are going to take on the appeals process discussion.
I can do that. Thank you, Mr. Smetana. So one of the other other new processes that we've had the opportunity to use since adoption of the new LDC this last June is the appeals process. And the biggest difference between the appeals process that we previously had in place under the old LDC and what we have under the new LDC is that we've drawn a very distinctive line between when council is acting as a fact finder, the original decision maker, and when council is acting as an appellate body. And the distinction there essentially means that if council is the original decision maker, you're still taking evidence, we're having a true public hearing, we have more public interaction at that juncture. However, if council is hearing an appeal of a decision that was originally made by the director, the amount of public interaction at the stage that goes to council is a little bit more limited. We don't take new evidence at that point. What council is doing at the appeals stage is considering the evidence as presented to the original decision maker and making a determination based on that evidence. So what I wanted to do, since we've had the opportunity this year to use that process, I wanted to revisit that with council and make sure that we've really captured all of your feedback related to that. One of the things that we have done as far as the appeals process is we went back and we looked at how we build out the record for those appeals and what council would be considering specifically to make certain that we have appropriate opportunity for public comment for anything that might come before council. So that's part of what caused us to add in that new notice of administrative decision where the applicant will send out notice to the same individuals who would have received notice of the original application that invites individuals to submit additional public comment to the director for his consideration prior to the director making his decision. That public comment that the director receives would be part of the record that then goes to City Council. So that's one of the things that we've considered, but I just want to make sure that we are capturing all of your feedback related to that appeals process.
Mr. Marriott.
Thank you. So I have a comment about this, and I think it's much like my previous comment about conditional use approvals, and that's, I go back to the expectations of the citizens, of the people who elect us, and I think when they envision a decision by the community development director and that they would like to appeal that decision, I think what they're wanting to appeal is the decision, not appeal the technical sufficiency of the decision, I guess. And I almost see it as within that appeals process, that's what we're doing is we're just checking that there were no technical details missed in the community development director's decision versus I think what the expectations of the citizens is, which is we don't like that decision. We would like the evidence to be, evidence to be heard and considered a public hearing to be had in lieu of the community development director's decision. So I don't know if we have any way we can be briefed in that, or if there are options there, or if there are not options there. But it's another one of those places I feel this disconnect kind of between what we have, what we've adopted with the Land Development Code, and what the expectations of most of our citizens, some of whom are development professionals and others who this is the first development they've ever looked at. But kind of the common sense instinctual look at how things should be seems to me that we've got some incongruity there. So I don't know. I would like to look at that maybe deeper myself.
In terms of the citizen participation in the appeal in front of council?
Well, and what the appeal is. So is the appeal a de novo hearing, or is it not? Is it a new hearing on the same subject, or is it a review, for lack of a better term, of the community development director's decision?
It would be a review with the council's ability to completely make a different decision based on the same evidence that the director reviewed and made his decision on. And so if that's something, if you'd rather do a new hearing, it would be a different process, and we could certainly change the process and tweak those ordinances to get it to a place where it's more of a second public hearing. I think the reason we had previously gone to this new appeals system is that it creates a more efficient, streamlined process that starts to gradually move us towards some finality. So the target isn't constantly changing for both the applicant and the opposition groups all the way up until the time that it's reviewed by council. And that was some of the concern before, but obviously that how you conduct the appeal is a policy decision that we're happy to incorporate your feedback into.
All right. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'll speak to, I understand certainly where Mr. Marriott is coming from, and what I think citizen expectation is that it is a trial de novo. And I think what you're talking about might be a good compromise in that, because I do like the finality, and frankly, I'd like to keep the political aspects out of these decisions as much as possible, and that we're making decisions based upon non-political and not, more on what's in the best interests. And so if we have a better way to get good citizen input in at the front end so that they've had that bite at the apple, that there's not a need for either side to have another bite at the apple when it comes before City Council, and that the City Council certainly could put total weight on one side different than what the planning director did in terms of making his decision, but it's based upon the same evidence that the planning director considered. So I like your concept of giving good notice that here's your opportunity to give your 2 cents worth, and recognize that input that you're giving will be considered by City Council should this matter be appealed. I mean, that's where I come from on it.
Any other thoughts or comments?
Mr. Jones?
Just to follow up to that, don't we have the same radius expectation on those that are administratively approved as well? So meaning, if there's an application that the director could approve administratively, what are the notice parameters? How will the public know to provide their input, and how far is that parameter today?
So what we're proposing as part of these latest LDC changes would be a change from what we're doing right now. It would apply to administrative decisions made by the director, and the way that we've built it in is that we've allowed the director discretion to require a specific notice go out to everyone who received notice of the original application that now is the time to comment. That is a new feature. We didn't previously have that in place, so if council approves these new revisions, that additional notice would go into place and the director would be able to require it. When we have, we might not want to do that with every single project, but projects of a certain scale, the director is going to decide, okay, we really need a little bit more public input on this one. We really need to build out that record, and would require the developer to provide that additional notice.
Yeah, so I guess as previously stated, I would just recommend that we have some sort of scaled approach to how the director would then look for community feedback.
I think that makes sense.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other lights on or questions. I'm sure we've muddled some of this and have created more work for our team, and I apologize for that, but we want to get it right. And the areas where there was not questioning, I'm going to take silence as indication that we don't have a lot of heartburn with those, and I get a thumbs up and some head agreements on the ones that we did not talk about that we're fine with moving forward in the direction that the team is recommending.
Yes, thank you for your feedback.
Okay. That's when Mr. Devon's like, oh gosh, come on guys, you're making my life difficult. Thank you both for an excellent presentation. Good information by everybody that's been involved in this. We now turn back to public comment. Do we have individuals in the public that would like to address City Council? Come on down to the podium, and thanks for sticking around tonight.
We wore our City Council uniform because we were told this is the uniform, so we don't know how else. Just teasing. I think I'm going to let my board counterpart go first.
My name is Phil Langford. I live at 16878 West 65th Circle in Arvada. We've been here for 25 years, so pretty much, you know, a native of the area. And the things that we really want to talk about, the Ralston Valley Coalition, which I'm on the board and all of these guys are, is really a constituent of, you know, like 10,000 people that really care about Arvada and care about what developments happen and, you know, all of the different things that are going on with Arvada. We strongly feel that there should be parameters on infill properties and future land development by adding a down zone to residential to protect, you know, current residential property owners. We're also aware that the proposed changes of the LDC in regards to semi-trucks, the community really needs a lot more information on that. I don't know what I'm trying to say, that information. Anyway, the truck definition really needs to be consistent with industry standards and traffic studies and all kinds of things like that. Changing the round trip is not really consistent with traffic engineers' use. This is going to really cause a big problem with, you know, just definitions. We need to get it right when we're looking at, you know, differences in trucks and
sir, if I could have you direct your comments to City Council.
Sure.
You bet.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Okay. I'd like to give the rest of my time to Gina.
Well, and technically, you each have 5 minutes, so.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll introduce myself. I'm Gina Hallisey. I live at 14626 West 68th Place. And I, as well as these nice gentlemen, it's on the board for the Ralston Valley Coalition. And you know us from Protect Maple Valley Park, our original little group that came before you. But when we looked at the LDC, this came to our attention from our members. You know, we get lots of emails and phone calls, and I don't know, all of a sudden they think we're the information hub. So it's a big volunteer job, but we do it, and we field those calls and emails. And some of the things that they brought up, so when will these changes be set for public hearing? I'm hearing that that's one of the questions I would have, that they're going to have to do a little bit more work. So I'm assuming we saw something about October 5th. Is that not going to be the case? So we would want to know, you know, what's the rush, I guess. We would like for you to look at this a little closer, especially related from heavy to industrial. We definitely have concerns on the LDC changes in regards to infill developments. There should be special parameters for sure on that. And we're curious why you're only defining semi-trucks. I think a lot of the things you have already mentioned, and I appreciate that you're picking up on the same things that we are when reading this. When you look at vehicles such as vans that transport cargo, they should be defined to, you know, as a truck. They are in other cases, they're defined as trucks. So we just want to know, why is it only semi-trucks? I guess we're confused on that. A big concern would be making these proposed changes as we read them, and I could be reading them wrong, would be allowing heavy logistics centers in a light industry zone. So the city could be technically allowing upzoning, if I'm reading it right. So will all light industry be allowed to upzone if this amendment is allowed? So basically all of Arvada, anybody who has light zone industry could say, well, now I can be a heavy logistics center and I can add 500 vehicles or whatever. So it's just confusing because it says heavy industry is more than 30 trips. Heavy logistics is more than 50 truck trips. Light industry is fewer than 50 truck trips. So technically, IL can have almost as many trips as heavy logistics within one trip, and it could have 19 more than heavy industry. It's just really confusing. So in my mind, if heavy industry is 30, and you're saying that you are now going to make these round trips, and nobody said that word, but that's how it's going to be defined, as a round trip, that's technically 50 round trips is 100 trips. So am I wrong in reading that? I'm not sure I'm reading it right. So the community is confused, and they want to understand, because in their mind, you are doubling the trips in a light industry zone. So I just want to remind you that if this change is made, then 50 round trips is if you're saying you can't have more than 50 trips in light industry, you're technically saying that's 98 trips. One way in, one way out, because that's how the industry standard is. One way in, one way out. So I've asked, where is our precedent on round trips? It's always been round trips. We know it's always been round trips. That's what we heard. And we've heard that for a year or so. And I've asked several times, where's the precedent? I want to see all the other light industry where 50 trips is round trips. And we haven't seen that. So I think we all need to get all this in front of us and look at that, and look at what we've done in the past, look at what we're going to do in the future. And I like the idea of looking at infill properties specific, what you're all saying. I think that's what the community wants, because this piece of dirt is different than this piece of dirt. And we're learning that. We're talking to people, we're talking to developers, we're talking to property owners, we're learning. So, dang it, I didn't want to be a planner. I plan events. This is not the kind of planner I wanted to be. But we are learning about planning, and we're learning about our neighborhoods and what people want in the neighborhoods, and I'm learning what mixed use is and neighborhood commercial. So I think that we would like to be engaged in this process. I think instead of rushing this through and getting it all done in October, I would encourage you to let the community be involved in the process and tell you what they want the land development code to look like. And maybe this is a time to do the comp plan, because I think it would be contradictory to the comp plan if you make these changes as we read them. And I'm going to finish 40 seconds early.
Thank you.
Well, City Council, thanks for having us before you tonight. Appreciate it, Mr. Mayor. My name is Mike Schweitzer. I live at 14615 West 62nd Place in Arvada. I've been there for 20 years. We moved here because of the family-oriented and the residential and light commercial and the environments that we have. My partners pretty much stole all of my thunder. We share a lot of notes, so they've talked about a number of things. I just want to thank the council and Mr. Pfeiffer, Mr. Marriott, and Mr. Jones, and the rest of the council. Please consider intelligent development in our area. Thank you.
Thank you all for your input, and we'll certainly have our team get back to you in terms of timing. Frankly, I don't know what the timing's going to be. There's parts of this that, look like it's going to be pretty easy, and we may address those first, and then we may have subsequent discussions with regard to some of these other pieces as we move forward. So, Ms. Morris, do you have anything to add to that, or?
I just wanted to raise the idea of timing in terms of, if this council wants to be the council to approve something, that has to be done relatively quickly. So if we decide we want to take a step back, the compromise might have to be that the council after November is the one that makes the decision on some of those other issues.
And some of the current council members who won't be here may like that. So we'll have that discussion, and that's a two-edged sword, because obviously this council has been well seasoned and has had some baptism by fire on some of these things. So that's something we'll have to discuss. But certainly I would think that you all heard tonight that council is equally concerned about some of these definitions. What's light industrial, what's heavy industrial, what's a truck, what's a, so I think we're on the same page in terms of that we want to get this clarified and get it right. So we'll go from there. Mr. Dev, anything else?
Not
with
on this
regard-
matter. Thank you.
With regard to this
Yeah. Yes.
workshop? Okay, we will move now to city council reports. Mr. Marriott.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just wanted to make one report. As my fellow colleagues know, I've been serving on the Rocky Mountain Metro Airport Noise Roundtable, and we met again today, and I just give you a little update on where that's at. We have spent 9 months here, 8 months, kind of getting formed together. We're still meeting by Zoom. I wish we were meeting in person. I think the meetings might be a little more effective in person, but I think we'll get there eventually. The Noise Roundtable is kind of finding its feet and finding what it can do and can't do. Currently, we're reviewing the airport business plan, land use plan, and potentially making some comments about that. I will note that I think the roundtable has had some effect, that the airport land use plan does have within it, and within the suggested scoring matrix for projects, does have noise as one of the factors, which I believe didn't exist before. So I think that it is being effective, and I think there's a good balance to be struck there between airport operations and noise. One last thing, we were invited on a tour of the airport a couple weeks ago, and I participated in that tour, and it's exceptional. You guys, if you get a chance to get to that airport, you should. There's an aircraft manufacturer, Pilatus Aircraft, on the west end of the airport that just absolutely amazing. They bring these business jets in as kind of empty, and they build the interiors of them. And they're a bunch of workers, several hundred workers, high-paying jobs, aerospace jobs, and as well as business for other companies and vendors outside that become suppliers to them. And it's really terrific economic development. I think the airport is really vital to our county, to our city. A lot of our citizens work there, and some of our businesses trade up there. So I think it's really important. If you get to do a tour, please do it. It's well worth it. That's all I have.
Hey, Mr. Devon.
Next Monday, we'll be coming back to you with some additional information on a workshop as well as a business meeting. So,
Very good. Ms. Morris?
Nothing from me, Your Honor.
Very good. We stand adjourned.